And welcome everyone to another episode of One by One. My name is Michael Kraus. One by One is a podcast dedicated to highlighting the people, ideas, and movements helping shape a more connected, compassionate, and sustainable future for humanity. In partnership with the Arctic Circle, this series explores one of the most important regions on Earth, not only environmentally but symbolically, because the Arctic is far more than a place on a map. It is a mirror reflecting the profound interconnectedness of life on our planet. What happens there affects all of us. The changing Arctic is reshaping climate, ecosystems, indigenous communities, economies, and international cooperation itself. Yet beyond the headlines and scientific reports, it's also inviting us into a deeper conversation about relationship, our relationship with nature, with one another, and with ourselves. Tonight, we explore a dimension of that relationship that is often overlooked. Beyond data and policy, beyond maps and measurements, lies the human experience. How do sound, stillness, meditation, and consciousness shape the way we perceive the world around us? And could cultivating inner coherence become an essential part of creating a more harmonious future on our planet? And joining us again is Mickaela Grace, whose voice and perspective continue to illuminate the growing global conversation around awareness, connection, and our shared human future. We're also honored to welcome Dr. Jeffrey Thompson, internationally recognized pioneer in neuroacoustics and therapeutic sounds. For decades, Dr. Thompson has explored the profound effects of sound and frequency on the human mind and body, helping people around the world discover new pathways to healing, resilience, creativity, and inner balance. And joining us as well is Dermot Duffy, co-founder of PhiCube, an initiative exploring how advanced technologies, data, and collaborative intelligence can help people and organizations make better decisions in an increasingly interconnected world. His work invites us to consider how innovation can become a catalyst not only for efficiency but for greater understanding, cooperation, and positive global impact. And joining us is Skai. Skai spent 3 years in silence, anchoring into the zero-point energy field day and night. From that silence emerged his zero-point mission, anchoring humanity into source by 2050, and his foundational double vortex practice, which combines somatic work, mindset mastery, and quantum energy work to clear emotional trauma, chronic disease, and deep-rooted blockages at their source. Through meditation and consciousness awareness, Skai reminds us that meaningful change in the world begins with the quiet transformation within each and one of us. So thank you everybody for being here, and thank you everyone joining us from around the world. This is One by One, and let us continue this conversation. And so one of the first questions that I'd wanted to ask Dr. Jeff, the episode today is called The North Pole Alliance and Cymatics, Using the Power of Sound to Rebirth and Reboot Us All. And cymatics, for the people that are not familiar with the term, is the science of making sound visible. And so my question to you, Dr. Jeff, is what is sound? All ancient traditions have incorporated sound into their wisdom long before science was actually emerging here on the planet. And so if we really strip it down to its bare essential, what is sound?
That's a good one. When I went to school, which was so long ago that I don't even want to talk about it, we were taught that the whole world and everything in it is made of photons and electromagnetic fields. And we learned the electromagnetic spectrum, which had down at one end television and radio, and then it went up to X-rays, and then went up to color, and then it went up to cosmic rays and gamma rays. But there is a second master force in the universe, which is sound, that form a master universal yin yang of two forces that work the whole system. Sound is sort of the silent partner. Uh, in modern physics, and particularly in quantum physics now, the world of electromagnetism and light, photons, and on the sound side, it's phonons. There's the smallest quantum particle of a sound, and they're mirror images of each other. The photon has positive charges, and the phonon has negative charge and negative gravity. So sound waves float up, and electromagnetic field waves go down and affected by gravity. Sound is pure energy moving through a medium at a certain frequency. Pure energy, it's force, it's pressure. So when we think about where we all began, at at some point in the womb, your consciousness awakens in the void. You don't have language, so thinking is like, your cat thinks, but doesn't use words. So if you can imagine thinking without language, that's you when you first began. And then at 16 to 24 weeks, neurodevelopment has reached a point where the five senses come online for the first time. But you're in the dark, so the eyes aren't working, and your nose and mouth are filled with fluid, so you're not smelling and you're not tasting. But sound travels through water 5 times better than it does through air. So the only experiences that all of us had in common for the whole time we were in the womb was a sound and vibrational experience. 3 things is what we experienced for that 6, 7 months. And that's sound, vibration through the vibration sense network, my skin, the largest organ, separate from hearing, and three-dimensional position sense. Semicircular canals and position sense are hardwired into hearing because the inner ear has got the semicircular canals that attach to the cochlea, and the nerves coming from the vestibular and the acoustics join together and become the vestibular acoustic nerve. They're so intertwined that there's something about 3D that's extremely important. Why I, as a practitioner, have always spent a lot of extra time and attention to process the sounds I'm using in 3D. So we have 3D perceptuability because it's one of the primal aspects of how the system orients itself in space and time. It talks to the deepest part of my unconscious mind. And I think this is the reason why sound has always been chosen in every culture throughout history as the primary #1 tool for affecting health and consciousness and awakening consciousness. Chant, bowls, drums, gongs. Every culture has got its sound experience that is part of its major culture because it speaks to a part of me that was the first thing I ever experienced. So of course it's got the best ability to reach the deepest part of my unconscious experience because it's the first thing I ever experienced at all. But aside from that, this idea that sound as mechanical energy wave moving through mediums. There was a period of time when I began exploring taking 3D recordings of nature sounds. So I'm out in the woods and there's the birds flying around and there's some water down by your feet. And when you listen to that recording, it just blows your socks off because you realize that there's like half the things that are there, you didn't even hear them. And you're completely taking uh, uh, that you never hear the 3D in your world because you haven't not heard 3D. So as soon as you do an artificial 3D and you put it through headphones and you hear all these things in their spatial positioning, you're now completely and forever changed. Because I remember going out in Virginia when I visited my parents, when they had a farm, take these 3D microphones and go out and stand under a big elm tree. And it was sort of starting to become a rainy day. So there's some dark clouds, and I'm standing under this tree, and thunder is rolling across the sky back behind me. And this light rain is starting to come down. And there's some birds flittering around here and there. And when I go back in the house and listen to this recording, there's grass crickets off into the distance all around me. I didn't even hear them. And I can hear every single raindrop on every single leaf in that tree, 10 feet, 15 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet. And that thunder's rolling across the sky. After that, my world was 3D again. That I became very aware that my world is 3D, that I can, and I take it for granted. I don't think about it. Just that one little aspect of how you can change your life by becoming aware of something that you see and hear and do all the time is a powerful mechanism for, is part of what I can only imagine what it would be like to be in silence for the period of time that you were in, Skai, because it's the same thing. Once you're in silence, when you come back and the world is noisy. There's, doing a silent meditation for 10 days without speaking, and then you speak, you're choosing your words. You're blowing breath across your vocal cords and making noises and shaping them with your mouth. It's very, you know, there's something about turning the off switch and turning it back on that resets something. Um, Sound has been a way of doing that. That it's very difficult. People are going, "How do I meditate?" You're going, "Excuse me," but the person who's asking that question is the one who has to be silent. You're not.
So,
You're not. That it's not an answerable question. You're before a thought if you really want to get there. And so you sit there and your mind is busy, and the process of trying to get that mind to somehow get out of the way so I can find my silence. And for whatever reason, when you take a Tibetan bowl, think about it for a minute. Somebody at some point in the past had to make the first Tibetan bowl. There was somebody who made the first one, right? Just think about that. So some monk comes out from behind the monastery with this thing, this contraption, and everybody's going, "Okay, what's that?" And he says, just close your eyes for a second. And he starts rubbing this bowl, and something about the sound of that bowl cuts through everything. It's like the noise just completely stops. It's like, and everybody's going, "How did you do that?" I mean, it took me 10 years to get this level of silence, and you did it instantaneously by rubbing some metal bowl. You know, sound is a mind-boggling tool of how it communicates to the deep parts. Aside from the physics of wave fronts, when I'm speaking to you, if we were together in a room and I'm speaking to you and I'm blowing wind across my vocal cords and I'm shaping it with my mouth in various ways and shooting these sound packets of air molecules at you, right? And a teeny tiny little proportion of that is going down my ear and driving, my eardrum and the mechanisms and the language processing centers of what you're saying. But the wavefront, the majority of the wavefront of that shaped second master force of the universe, pure energy moving through a medium of sound waves, is striking my body. And it's a force pressure that's pushing on the cells. And when the cells distort, it causes piezoelectric discharges from the microtubules that make up the cell wall and how the cells are put together. We're causing an electromagnetic piezoelectric discharge throughout all the body tissues in the shape of the sound. So there's all kinds of more things going on here than we all suspect. There's also the interface of where these two parts of the yin yang come together. Sound waves cause electromagnetism. And if you think about it, there's a thing called sonoluminescence, where you have this spherical container in a lab filled with water, and you've got a couple of speakers attached to it, and you put a tone into the water, and the tone is a factor of the radius of the sphere, and the tone is the radius of the sphere. So you've tuned the frequency exactly to this sphere so that it's the tone of the sphere, so that all those sound waves meet exactly in the center when you tune it right. They meet exactly in the center. And now you've got maximum pressure at the center, which creates a bubble. And the bubble collapses, called cavitation. And at the moment that the bubble collapses, this cavitation event causes a burst of light, brighter than the sun, hotter than the sun. They call it a star in a jar. Light waves electromagnetism created by sound. So if you believe if you believe in the Big Bang, which I don't necessarily believe in, but if you believe in the Big Bang could have been the result of universal sized sound waves, which we call gravity waves, colliding together and creating a sonoluminescence explosion that created our whole universe, right? um, there's one school of thought that is talking about this concept of brain waves, right? This whole thing of consciousness and brain waves and states of consciousness associated with alpha and theta and delta electrical discharges of neurons in synchronized sweeps of polarization across the cortex at certain speeds. Where did the brain waves come from? What's causing the depolarization? And one big school of thought is that the thalamus, two big globules at the top of the brainstem that spread out to the cortex, is the master switchboard for the brain, is causing pressure waves. The thalamus is creating pressure waves at brainwave speeds and communicating to the cortex, and the pressure wave causes piezoelectric discharges on the microtubules of the neurons and the axons. And the wave front pressure wave moving down the axon is depolarizing the microtubules along the crest of that wave and generating piezoelectric discharges, which could be the brain waves themselves. So the whole mechanism is run by sound, and the electromagnetic discharges are sort of the side effect that we're measuring with an EEG. So put that in your pipe and smoke it. I mean, it's so much bigger than we give it credit for. Sound is this sort of silent master partner in the mix that we're not aware of, we don't think of. And what happens below 20 hertz and above 20,000 hertz is still there. We don't have some name for it anymore. I mean, as the frequencies go lower and lower, we've got infrasound that has a measurable effect on us. Higher and higher frequencies above 20,000 hertz are eventually becomes, something like ultrasound. But what happens when it's above the range of ultrasound? It's still there. There's still something there. What about when it's getting slower and slower and slower, slower than infrasound, until the sound wave has got peak to peak 100 million light years, and we call it gravity waves. and we can't see it moving because our lifespan is too short. But those gravity waves are interacting with each other like ripples on a pond, except in such a massive scale that it's hard to wrap your mind around. And as they cross over, they're creating summations and phase cancellations, black holes, and perhaps sonoluminescence explosion events that become stars. And, it's all in slow-mo. It, it's a, and then inside your cells, we've got the same thing happening. We've got these piezoelectric discharges from sound waves interacting. If I'm laying on a sound table with sound waves coming through my body, my cells, my body is 70% water. Well, the water is biological water, is colloidal fluids, but biological water is weird stuff. It's balancing on the razor edge between colloidal water and a liquid crystal. And the property of crystals is the piezoelectric discharge from pressure waves. So that means that if we have the right kind of pressure wave at a certain time moving through the body of our water body, we tip it over into a liquid crystal. And now we are a massive 70% water liquid crystal that's primary property is piezoelectric discharge. And in all the cells. And that means that the cymatics pattern, the geometric patterns that arise from each frequency in water or in sand or whatever that is that we see, these sacred geometric designs that form as standing waves, is happening in your body, happening in the cells, in the water in your cells. And it's got a physical interface effect on your physiology and how your system functions through the geometry that forms from what sound actually looks like when you put it through a metal plate and can see the sand forming these patterns. Or you put it through water, it's even more amazing. So there's something about geometry, sound frequencies, electromagnetism, where all of these things seem to come together, and the universe created a palette for them to paint their picture, and that palette is you and me. This body is the transformational surface where these grand forces of the universe come together. The big yin-yang of the universe of electromagnetism and sound, photons and phonons, meet at an interface that is hyperdimensional. You and me and other biological forms are that interface. It's where those things come together. And the product is consciousness, right? It's
Michael, do you mind if I jump in here for
Yes.
your audience?
Yes.
Because when we hear all of that vastness, we need to understand, like, how does that relate to me, and how can I bring that home to my own life and my own body? And I want to really take these geniuses and dance them together. So here's where everything that Dr. Jeff just said relates so much to the beauty and richness of Dermot's life's work and Skai's life's work. And I would love to kick it over to them. But what Dr. Jeffrey just said, which is so profound about your relationship to the sound you hear at the beginning of your life, like the first sound you ever heard is usually the mother's heartbeat. So you oriented yourself, and I'm going to use a word here that's really important from an emotional intelligence perspective, who you are in the world, how you relate to others. You're really engaging proprioception all the time, which is what Dr. Jeff is saying, is this idea of I need the 3D to really understand my place in space. Who am I? How do I fit in? And I'm bouncing off of other. So we're actually making a geometry. We're making a shape with every thought form, with every emotion, with every perception of I enter into the field expecting a certain outcome. And so there are these relationships that are really vital. And before we start talking about the Arctic, I really want to explore the life's work of Skai and Dermot and how it relates to Dr. Jeff's mastery, because there's this infinity dance between sound and silence, right? Movement and still point. And so you have magnets that move, you have magnets that sit still. You have someone like Skai who engaged in a conscious choice to go into silence, and then the magnitude of change that happened in his life and how much he was able to then change the quantum fields because of the dance between movement and silence. So I would love to hear how their life's work ties in with the visible shape of the sound you make out there in the world, because you're really bumping into human relationship tied to your own relationship to self. So.
Yeah, and I would love to hear, thank you, Mickaela, and thank you, Dr. Jeff. My question to Skai would then be, is there silence, or is silence, from what I hear from Dr. Jeff, is that there is actually no silence. I mean, as an audible thing. But what is sound then to you, or what is stillness to you? Stillness is not the absence of sound. Stillness must then therefore be something different. Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely, Michael. That's the very beginning of my book, 3 Years in Silence. I explain that silence is not the absence of noise, at least in the way I'm saying it. Silence is that deep place of peace, of peace and power. And to my experience, there's always relative sound, relative movement. Everything is relative, so you can bring it to the closest level. Yeah, at times when there would be no sound, but to me, it's not really about that. It's really about reaching that place where you actually feel extended space. You feel more space. For me, silence is really a place of deep space, of deep power. And I didn't choose that consciously. Like Mickaela said, I was forced to go into silence by the force guiding me, my higher self, which I embody more now. But at the time, it was really not something I choose, and I say I'm going to spend 3 years in silence. I was really struggling between two polarities, had a big project, and I realized I couldn't be like that. So I asked to what I call God, how can I unite, basically? And then the silence started. And so it's very interesting to hear what Dr. Jeffrey is saying, because it's confirmed exactly what I've been intuited. I'm not a scientist, but I've been going deep into understanding our world experientially, energetically. And for me, I had a vision a long time ago when I had my spiritual awakening in 2001. I was reading the Vedas, the Indian Vedas, like 10,000 years ago, where they explain the formation of the universe through ether, air, fire, water, and earth. And so it's something I've been going through now 25 years that I use in my energy work for healing, for working on the weather, for different things. And how I understand it, it confirms what you say. For me, ether is pure consciousness. It's basically that void that contains everything before there is even creation, because there is even anything. And right after ether, it's sound, air, basically, which is coming. And I put air before fire, and air, as I see it, it's like introducing a groove into reality. You have that pure oneness and differentiated, and air is the groove. It's the first movement that activates something, that creates something within the whole. And so air is movement, circulation, and that like the phonons, because indeed it's to me a negative energy. It creates the space for energy to enter. And through that movement, and that's what I use for my healings, a double vortex. So through a counterclockwise movement, that's how I see that first movement. It begins accelerating and creating fire, creating energy, creating electricity, which comes like third, basically. And through that movement again, I see fire as like basically creating a sort of plasmic magma that's starting forming together, which creating magma waves, which is water. And for me, water is harmony, order, regulation. That's the element I use when I call energies for that, harmonizing things. So it's like these big waves that begin creating order, even before matter. And then this big wave began interacting together, colliding together, collapsing together, and creating matter, creating earth. The last element, that beautiful thing that we embody and that we live in 3D. So I'm using it like this, very, very likely to what you've been explaining. And what I've learned, through this experience, it's indeed you never have full silence. We're living in a world, that's busy, and no matter, even if you go, on a mountain, you're gonna have wind, you're gonna have birds, you're gonna have things. So to me, that's not even the goal. Pure silence. The goal is increasing that space, And as you do so, you're entering what I call now the 0 point. I used to call it at the time, it was 13 years ago, God or source, or the force, that force that was guiding me. I call it a lot 0 point because I love that. But 0 point is not a point, it's a field. It's a 0 point energy field. Basically, when we enter that vastness and move, still. And when we enter that, and we can all do that, and we all do that at moments, and come out of it, we begin creating, we begin really coding reality. It's for me entering God mode, it's entering that place when we begin changing the very fabric of reality. And that's why when we do collective healings, we see people having tinnitus disappearing, having cancer healing, Crohn's disease healings. Why? Because these people are entering that space where they begin to recreate with sound, with frequency, with consciousness, and reprogram their cells and reprogram their healing. And so for me, my personal mission is really to make people understand that we all have that. We can access that through technology. Nikola Tesla has been building that, and I think other scientists as well. But we can access that directly as well within us at all times, any moments. And that's, to me, the very way to create really from a place of pure peace. I think all the rest is agitation, is noise. You have the impression that you are creating things, that you are changing the world, but until you are really reaching that frequency of pure silence and you can really align with it, for me, you're just maintaining more or less the noise at different degrees. And once you really begin to access this, you begin changing things because you become one with things. You understand them. You're not just with your mind trying to reprogram them forcefully. So my deepest goal is that many people understand that, through energy, through meditation, through science, because science is proving the exact same thing, that the mystic have said, and that some other people experience also today. So we can use our own inner technologies to shift ourselves and our collective, and also our collective power and our science to do all of these. And the last thing I would share is, after the silence, from what Jeffrey was saying, I remember I went to an ashram. I sat 1 year on a chair, 23 hours a day roughly. I would not go to bed. I would just go 1 hour to have a very tiny breakfast, and I would come back on my chair, mainly eyes open. So constantly going deeper to harness energy, to be able to withstand that, to sustain it. And there will be very little words sometimes, when we go to a coffee or people will speak, and that I would forget. But after that, I went to an ashram, and there was this girl who used to speak a lot. She was very sweet, and we were working in the farm. And after, I would spend an hour or two, and I would go back, I would walk. The first year I sat, the second year I walk, and the last year I run, about 50 miles a day. And so the second year I was walking, and I would go on my walk after, and I would hear her voice, for 2 hours. I realized my mind has become like a blank slate. I was not used to and it was spinning. So I was saying, it's very short. And I also learned to be myself very short. I would speak a few words at that time during that years, when I was sometimes asked for food or for something like that. But very to the point. And that was actually great, to realize that you can first communicate so many things without even speaking. I would go in shops, usually don't say a word, and I would buy my food, or take my drinks when I was running. I would not speak, and it didn't feel really weird, because I was in that frequency. I was not finding it weird. I was just really centered there. But progressively, I came back into the world, and it's true that the world is noisy. So now I'm also going back to more silence and making more space, because my mind has become more busy again. So I know how to go there, silence it. That for me is not complicated. But maintaining that silence through today's chaos, it's a real challenge. So my best advice on that is not looking for pure silence. No, but when you meditate, it's just looking for more space, more quietness, more peace. And from that, the true silence is coming.
So thank you, Skai. And from what I'm hearing from you is that silence is actually presence. And so
It's very.
and so I can literally, when I look at a flower or when I look at a plant, is it then the sound of the plant that brings me into that 0 point energy field? And is that perhaps the, and I'm going to turn it over to Dermot in a second, is it the magnetism of the plant that is actually attracting me to come into that point of stillness, because the plant allows me to experience that in an instant, the same way then perhaps a meditation practice can? And is it am I being magnetized? I'm not a scientist, so I'm not even sure whether that is the right terminology. Am I being magnetized and attracted to that which is, and allow through my present to experience what actually is, if that makes any sense? And so one specific question, because Dermot is the expert on magnetism, one question that I have been going on in my mind for many, many years is, imagine your fridge. Imagine trying to put a picture on your fridge, and now imagine you're holding this picture up to your fridge as long as you can. And maybe you can do it for 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 hours, but at some point you're going to be running out of energy and you're going to let go and the picture is going to fall down. Now you take the tiniest, weeniest, smallest magnet and you stick it on the fridge, and the picture will stay there forever. Where does the magnet get its energy, its infinite source of energy from? And maybe Dermot, if you can help me and our audience to understand.
Yeah. So I would say that the understanding of the phenomena of the magnet, like a child goes to the fridge, is fascinated by the attraction of the fridge magnet to the fridge, and they're trying to understand what's occurring here. Then the mind starts going into this kind of tangent of, what is this phenomena? What's this force, this invisible force that doesn't make any sense? So how do we begin to even comprehend it in any way? So the difference between a magnet that is magnetized and a magnet that's demagnetized or non-magnetized is that one is coherent and the other is not coherent. So there's actually no difference between a magnetized object and a non-magnetized object. If we're using a material such as neodymium, that material will dictate that the atomic variation in each of them objects are identical quantitatively. The qualitative aspect of the magnet is much more pure in terms of its coherency compared to the non-magnetized object. So ultimately, I'm tying this into kind of silence, which I would like to kind of go into. When we look at energy as movement, things moving. That's actually energetic discharge in the field. So that's energy on its way, and then it's eventually going to dissipate to a certain footprint again, to find equilibrium within the medium that Skai and Jeffrey talked about. So essentially, when we look at the aspects of silence, silence is always going to be potential energy. And we can dip into this energy at any point. We can find what we need to find from that, from a consciousness perspective, an awareness perspective. The world is essentially our oyster to try and see what we need from the field, for the field. And then also tying into my device known as the 5 cube, that came through the field, from the field, for the field. I'm just kind of stuck in the middle between trying to understand how it actually came through, what it means, and how it can serve a purpose on Earth, essentially. yeah, the infinite energy that comes from the magnet is essentially down to spin, and that's ultimately what it is. Spin is going in different directions. If we imagine like the fist is the atom, it's spinning in this direction. If we have an atom that's spinning in this direction, that's incoherency. But if we place an electric current through the material, both aspects will be spinning in unison. And that then creates that vortex mechanics, motion mechanics. It's essentially what Skai was talking about there, which is the ether, which is the pure silence. It's the base medium. And from that place, then everything starts to go down into different levels, such as plasma, electric fields, dielectric fields, magnetic fields, and then eventually becoming electromagnetic light, and then atoms. And then from atoms, we have molecules, macromolecules, organelles, organs, and eventually what we see in front of us is the human. So it's from these aspects that we can begin to understand that everything is interconnected. It's just different densities.
Dermot, can I interrupt you for a second? Your microphone is a little wobbly. If that's a professional sound terminology, do you mind maybe turning it off and on again? I'm
Sure.
not sure whether wobble is the right word for it, Dr. Jeff. I'll just call it wobbly.
Yeah, it's back on now.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. Awesome.
Okay. Yeah, so yeah, with these different density scales, we have a tendency to separate things. We call things electromagnetic light, dielectric fields, magnetic fields, but it's essentially all the same thing. We're just creating that separation. So it's just different flavors of the exact same essence. And then from that standpoint, it brings forward a lot of things that we can begin to understand. I love what Dr. Jeffrey said about the ear taking in sound. When the ear takes in the sound, it goes through a biological object known as the cochlea. And if you look at the cochlea, it's actually in a divine phi ratio. So it shows that there's ratio both within us that takes in the air medium, and then it has to go through this sort of ratio that then makes brainwaves essentially pick up on thoughts, or pick up on what's received from the signal, and then we can begin to understand and discern what that information actually is as it enters into the ear canal. So yeah, there's so many aspects within us that we look at that we be able to understand from the standpoint of we're very much looking at ourselves like straight lines in today's world. And we always look for X, Y, Z coordinates. We're looking for all these different standpoints. But ultimately, within us, we have straight lines, such as we place our arms out, we have a straight line. But then if we look at the overlapping way of bringing it back in, we have spiral motion mechanics. And that's where phi comes into place in terms of the device activity.
Dermot, your microphone is doing the same thing again. Maybe you can move it a little bit closer to the microphone.
I know on my side it's very, very hard to get what
Very
Dermot
hard
is
My
to
side, it's nothing. Which is the great irony of us talking about sound and magnetics and coherence, and we can't hear Dermot's wisdom.
And I wanna.
Yeah, I couldn't hear. I would have liked because it seems super interesting, but I hear one
I
word.
know, even when he talks about plasma and ether and healing, like Skai and Dermot, you create as many miracles as Dr. Jeff in your labs that I'm like, you all need to hear each other.
And it's really interesting because I'm using a high quality headset, and Dr. Jeff was talking about it in his introduction to create a new experience. I hear 20% on one ear and 80% on the other ear. So when I
Oh, wow.
bought those high quality headsets, I put them on. Now I can hear somebody being on the keyboard, and I can literally hear the keyboard taps,
Yeah.
and which was a completely new experience for me. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, Dermot, but maybe if you can move a little bit closer to the microphone.
Yeah, sure.
We make the test before to go.
Can you also do that magical thing you did where you turn it off and turn it back on sometimes?
Yeah, it sounds like there's a connection problem with the microphone because it's muted and funny and moving around, and the sounds aren't sharp, so it's very hard Pick out
Right.
your words.
So do I sound clear now?
That's better,
Well,
yeah.
if you keep going like that, for now it's good.
That's better.
My face looks so big. Okay. Yeah, so what I was talking about there was basically the density scales that we undertake, or we begin to understand in terms of taking things down from what Skai was talking about and Dr. Jeffrey, where there's this base medium. Tesla coined it as the ether. And that's basically where, when this is a part of the cosmos, we see it everywhere. We term it now as space-time, dark energy, dark matter. There's so many things that we use to try and put it in a box. But ultimately, it's essentially the essence of everything. And this ether is so subtle, it's actually what we actually experience with magnetism. So magnetic fields are on that subtle scale. That's why you wonder why does the wind not affect the magnetic field whenever we place two magnets together? It's because of the density scale. It operates through the motion mechanics of space-time. And when we trickle these things down, we begin to understand then that if we take it from the ether, it goes down into plasma, it goes to electromagnetic light. Electromagnetic light then compresses, creates atomic light, atoms. And then from atoms, we get molecules, macromolecules, organelles, organelles, and then eventually the human body. So that's how we begin to see from that standpoint, when we go to the silence, essentially, we're essentially the packed noise in the actual human body. So the silence is essentially potential energy. It always will be potential energy. And anything that is motion and force and magnitude in the medium is essentially the expression of that silence, which is the noise, but it's just the energy release, discharge. The more we compress actually in on the field, and this is observable through the Planck length, like Dr. Jeffrey's example there of the water. When we compress in on the Planck length, it reaches a boundary line where it actually bounces back out. So the charge that actually compresses in reaches a threshold and then bounces back out. And that's enough evidence for me to understand that, okay, there's a point where the pressure mediated cannot reach any further of a smaller spatial footprint. It has to reach a point where it has to bounce back out again. And essentially that's where energy is in the charge, is in the compression towards that smallest spatial footprint. So yeah, ultimately, we always think that we're infinitesimal, we're not important or whatever it may be, but the most energy is actually in the smallest space. And we're the congregation of that. We're the five-pointed star. We are the light body. We operate through phi. We operate through all these different mediums within, and from there we can begin to then play and just have fun and see what happens.
Thank you, Dermot. Mickaela, I would like to hand it over to you with your
I have so many things I want to say about the magic of the four of you. So sometimes my role is just to synthesize all the magic of, like, you know, someone's life's work where they're truly in their lane and they're emanating what Dr. Jeffrey just talked to us about, the star in the jar potentiation, right? So wow, the whole cosmos, right? When you bring sound wave and light wave together, where sound itself, the harmony of the spheres, right? Like if I'm being so true to myself, I'm emanating song, and it's the truest song I know to be. So like in Skai's life, I didn't choose silence, but I went into silence, you know, to figure something out. And then 3 years later, I was more potentiated, more powerful, like a blank slate, tabula rasa, that could become anything, because he might have experienced, perhaps he wouldn't use this language, but a star in the jar phenomenon of, like, if I'm my truest song and I'm a symphony emanating light wave and sound wave, and I'm being so true to myself, I'm connecting to source point, right? To 0 point technologies. So what I love about bringing all these little themes of what we talked about, even when you guys randomly talk about other people, there's really big metaphor here. So Michael, and by the way, you ask the most adorable, most powerful questions ever. Like as a question asker, I'm like, yes, he's brilliant. So this idea, I mean, it's like child mind, the innocence of child mind to be like, this photo, if I'm putting my finger up and sticking this photo on the fridge, I'm exerting energy. It takes energy for me to basically hold this photo up. And I get tired and bored, so I go away. But a magnet never complains and a magnet never gets tired. What is that energy and where does it come from? So really, there is, as Dermot would say, that is like the source of a magnet is coherence, right? So when there's coherence, what we essentially have is all three of these masters, their life's work is about resonance and coherence, magnetism, light waves, sound waves, 0 point. We're throwing all these words out. But really, when you're in coherence with the whole field, with the ether, with everything that ever was, with where silence and stillness meet, what you have is limitless energy. So what Dermot's saying, which is so profound, is like, oh, well, we could call that antimatter, anti-gravity, Tesla coil. Like we've got all these, we're all trying to find a word for the thing that's hidden in the box of energy, right? Where does energy come from and how can it be potentiated in a foreverness or a limitlessness like the sun, right? So we are essentially, when we're in coherence, there's no effort. And so when we look at that then through the lens of my institute and the Graceline Institute or emotional intelligence and trying to sort of create happier humans and a kindness quotient and a truth quotient and a grace quotient, or, when like my idea of Graceline is when outward conduct matches inner virtue. So when you're so true to self and source that you're emanating the song you were most meant to be, whether that's like waving your freak flag or more cowbell, or what I'm supposed to do is be an accountant and what I'm supposed to do is bake cupcakes with love in them. Like no matter what you think your life's mission is, if you're being so true to that essence and you're loving it and enjoying it, what Jake talked about in terms of the mission for us going to the Arctic is like, let's go see puffins, let's have a lot of fun, right? Like in the joy bomb of like, I am in the right place and the right time with the right people doing something for the right reasons in the right way, that rather than getting into the right and the wrong of it, that sensation of rightness, another word for that is coherence. Another word for that is resonance, right? Like I become a limitless 0 point technology when I'm so still and so quiet that I can hear the whisper of that proprioceptive understanding of what is my place in space. Do I love myself enough to take up space, right? And can I drop down into this like 0 point meditation where I can go into the finite of the blank slate or tabula rasa to say, oh, I can hear myself, but I could heal a brain tumor. Skai's work is so beautiful that even down to like regrowing cartilage of a knee, like anything is possible, any miracle is possible. And he's so sweetly humble, right? And Dermot is so sweetly humble, but people are healing Lyme disease using just magnetism through his invention, the Phi Cube, right? This idea that like you're taking, and I'm going to put this word into Dermot's mouth here because it goes back to Michael's beautiful refrigerator, is when you think about what's holding the picture up, it's stickiness. Like, oh, well, what that magnet is making the picture stick to the fridge. Well, actually, love is stickiness. Love is the bond, and 0 point is stickiness. It's creating a bond to the cosmos, a limitless energy in bound orientation. So all of us in the richness of this super cool mission, which I think is really about getting nerds together to go have fun, right? But in this mission and this global meditation that we're all diving into together, what we're doing is taking our bodies into a bigger field, into a field where there's a moment where the stickiness can get stronger by first the stickiness getting weaker. So when Dermot talks about magnets, right, there's a positive and negative charge. And then there's like, this idea of, well, wow, I've magnetized or gotten really stuck to my old story or stuck to an illness or stuck to a condition. But if I come into the 0 point of the nothingness, like Skai's taking people into such a pregnant pause, that's my word for it. Like he gets you so quiet, right? And my beloved Dan was walking by, and he never really comments on my Zoom calls. He's very private. But he was listening to Skai lead a 0 point meditation. And he said, whoever's voice that was, who's the man with the French accent? And I said, oh, that's my friend Skai. He was leading meditation. And he said, that was like a lullaby back to myself. And that's because Skai's voice is coherent, right? And Dermot's phi cube is coherent. And Dr. Jeffrey's putting you into an anti-gravity chair and letting you listen to full range 3-dimensional sound. But really what he might be doing is ushering you back to yourself before your nervous system got stuck to a story, stuck to a reality, stuck to a personality. So in that stickiness, right, what the Arctic Alliance is sort of allowing us to do is record the biotechnology that happens when human beings come into coherence, murmuration, collaboration. But really at the moment of this global eclipse, this super special eclipse, when the moon is shouldering the burden, right, and taking away the noise, which we've all talked about today, taking away the noise of solar wind and the kinetic structure and the wider storm of the wider torus of all the noises that ever were in the world, we have this moment of hush where we can decide to unstick ourselves from a story or an illness or a grievance or a stuck place, and then rebond, right, to something new and come back into that dural tube or that sacred 0 point or that like really calm, peaceful, present state where you're getting out of the spin and into stillness for a moment, so that then when you get into the wider view of going back to spin, you're a new person, right? Or I'm going to spin a different story. I'm going to be out in the world really maintaining this coherence that I felt. And then and it's sort of a joke, it has nothing to do with this person that Skai was talking about, but I love so much his example of like, wow, you know, I had been in silent meditation, and then I noticed that when you go back into language, and Dr. Jeffrey had said this too, when you go back into language, you're going to not only have precision, and this is my word for it, but you really go into reprioritization or prioritization when you have a big life-changing event. You're like, wow, that reprioritized things. When the planes hit the tower, we unified and reprioritized, right? So when you finally come into words, because you're birthing a thing with language, you're like, wow, Skai is saying I was so limited with my words because I wanted to be. And it took very few words. And words were energy. Words were putting my finger on the fridge to hold something up. So I don't want to exert over energy. I want to use basically efficiency of energy. And so then when he is so powerful in the reprioritization, and he's going to be careful with the words he says, and he's going to say less words because they have a boom, right? Like the Big Bang in the world, whether we believe in that or not, it's like, that's a booming effect. If I expect everyone's going to hate me, I get booming effect of them hating me. But what he said that was so profound in his story is, once I was this blank slate of 0 point possibility, then suddenly this person who loved to talk and talk so much, and her nervous system might have been and she talked a lot and she liked to talk. No judgment of the sweet woman who likes to talk. But suddenly he's like, I could hear her voice in my head when I went for my walk or my run. Because if we're a blank slate, right, we're actually imprintable like water, like the piezo effect, the tribal luminescence of crashing two quartz crystals together and you see a glow of light, right? That is actually in every moment you're telling a story, you're big banging a reality alive. So in the really cool mosaic of everyone's story here, we have this opportunity to say, wow, am I stuck in a story? Am I passive? Am I a victim? Do I think life's happening to me or at me? Do I think all these global problems we see, there's a they who should come in and rescue us and fix us? Or are we going to come into this pause, right, and be lullabied by Skai's voice or someone else's voice to basically say, what if I'm the dreamer dreaming the dream of the world? And what if I just see with my eye a cleaner world, a kinder world, a more collaborative world? What if I'm trying to serve and thinking, what can I give rather than what can I get? And so, but what he said that's so profound is when he was a softer, quieter, more present, blank slate, he was a canvas. So he was like, wow, that person's voice is having impact on me. And like, I hear her voice in my head instead of my own. And so I guess I'm all over the place because I love to be all over the place sometimes. But what I want to bring it back to and let each of these amazing speakers kind of just riff and dive in here is that we have this opportunity to not let other people's voices be in our head. We have this opportunity to not get so spun out, but we have this opportunity to realize, wow, I actually have the opportunity to be more precise with my voice and more coherent in the quantum to dream a miracle, dream something into being. But the sound coming off of me and the vision, right? The visible sound, the cymatics, which this episode is about, coming off of me, the shape I'm taking up in space or the shape I make with perception in space, and the magnetism by which my heart expects to find a thing, right? Those four what I call the base four elements, cymatics, shape of sound, right? Sound wave, biophotonics, the light wave coming off of me, the electricity coming off of me, the energy, the potency that I'm putting into it. And then what Dermot would say, at the end of the day, it's all just spin. The magnetism. What spin am I putting on that story, or what spin am I putting on this moment? So when we talk about those four elements, then each of us is creating a world, right? So when Dr. Jeffrey got really wild with us, he's like, these are big ideas and like cosmic concepts. Is you make a sound and you've made a world, right? And that's really profound. So I'm going to kick it to whoever you think should talk next, Michael. But I think when you combine all of these thoughts, they're really cool. And Dr. Jeffrey has actually been able to like play with space sounds and see what happens when you take sounds and gravity waves from way out there and put them in here. You literally can change the world.
Thank you, Mickaela. And to me, this was a living example of cymatics. Like when you were talking, I was able to drop into that still point and had almost a big bang new reality emerging out of me. And I'm like, wow, this is even within sound, within the spoken word, is that ability to really drop into that, into presence. And once you hit presence, then it's like whoa, what just happened? And I was mesmerized actually by the way you spoke, by the way you articulated, by the way you expressed yourself, and even by moving your hands, all of a sudden I could feel my body wanting to move with you. And if that's not cymatics, then I don't know. Dr. Jeff?
Well, I was thinking about the concept that there is no silence. Even down to the substrate of the smallest of the small. When we get down to the base of the quantum field, we've got quantum foam, which is this boiling nexus of unimaginable energies where particles are popping in and out of other dimensions. And however, in the world of sound, there is an interesting phenomenon. If I have a sine wave, a man-made tone with no harmonics, as simple as the sound can possibly get, an oscillator that's resonating in a certain frequencies. That sine wave on my recording studio software, you've got this line, and you've got the sine wave going up and down, above the line, below the line, above the line, so it looks like this. Right? Dr. Thompson's super illustrations abilities, where we have this sine.
It's a very nice drawing.
So we have the sine wave going up and down and up and down across this 0 point. And it creates something called nodes and antinodes. The nodes is where the circle is drawn, and the antinodes are the big thing above and below. So the antinode, the nodal points where it transits from the upswing to the downswing are points of silence. That within the sound that we're making is a continual balance of points of silence within every sound you've ever heard. That this interplay between the node and the antinode, and then you can take a certain sound at a certain frequency, let's say 100 hertz. So you've got 100 of these ups and downs and up and downs per second. That's 100 hertz, 100 cycles per second. That means that you've got 100 points of silence where it transits from the up to the down. And if I take that tone of 100 hertz, where you've got 100 upswings and 100, with 50 up swings and 50 down swings with 100 points of silence. And we take that sound and we invert it in 180 degrees, which you can do simply in software. Then that means that every upswing has a mirror of a downswing. And that is what's called phase cancellation. And that's how noise canceling headphones work. So in the noise canceling headphones, you've got this headphone over here has got a microphone, and so does this one. And it's recording what you're hearing and playing back on top of it in real time, 180 degrees out of phase, and phase canceling the sounds to silence. Now, most of these do it 1,000 hertz and below so that the air jet noise goes away, but you can still hear conversations. But some of them, like Bose speakers, have 100% phase cancellation, which when you put those things on, you flip the on switch, all sound disappears. Now, that's all happening within one ear. This ear is recording and phase canceling. This ear is recording and phase canceling. And I took that idea in clinical practice, actually more from meditating, the meditation portion of my practice. And now we're going to have the headphones where instead of the phase cancellation happening within the ear and in the ear creating silence, I've got the sound in this ear and the sound in this ear is rotated 180 degrees out of phase. And now we have silence and consciousness. The phase cancellation is happening in your brain, in your mental processing of sound waves. And in other words, this ear can hear this tone. This ear can hear this tone, but in between is phase canceled. It's a high-tech meditation technique where you can take, and this really gets someplace when you hook a person up to fancy machines like we do in our sort of clinic, and we can see on a computer screen live sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. And we can see the sympathetic is out of balance and stuck in the stress response. And we can do a sound sweep and look for a frequency that will collapse that to zero, homeostasis, zero stress in the system. And now we've got a tone that if we play that tone, puts you into this maximum state that you get to in deepest meditation. Your zero stress point, my safe place. And now if I take that tone as a reference tone and you sing that tone, now we've got your mantra tone. Now we've got the frequency that you're supposed to be singing that resonates you down to sort of your core. And if we take that recording of your voice and record it in 3D, and we put your voice over here singing your tone and your voice over here singing your tone and rotate it 180 degrees out of phase, we are canceling you. Highly specific, because it's all the harmonics and the overtones and the fundamental frequency are phase canceling your voice in your head and scientifically putting you into the pre-verbal state of silence in mind. The chatter is scientifically turned off.
Dr. Jeffrey, can I jump in here because you just said something so important that really is, in my witnessing, the true magic we could call miracle, according to Dr. Larry Farwell's work. But with you three, I'm going to ask you a question about like your clinical practice because I think it's a take-home gift you can give the audience here today. Is when you talk about what we would say collapsing the wave or phase cancellation. I think all four of us can talk about our own like clinical practice and helping people heal, which is that if we see ourselves as separate, then let's just use like basic shadow work or mirroring or looking at this from an emotional intelligence perspective, when someone can actually get out of dualism and going into like me versus you, right versus wrong, red versus blue, victim versus perpetrator, kill or be killed, right? Hero versus villain. So to be a hero or good, I got to cast someone as the villain. Well, that dualism only begets more separation, more dualism. So in a lot of these ancient practices, when we have that opportunity for the I to simply say, oh, wow, if I'm an if I'm an overgiver, I might magnetically attract an overtaker. Or if Skai has made a vow of silence, maybe he might, if he is quiet, he might attract an overtalker. And they'll be like two little tuning forks that magnetize each other, right? But when we have those two pieces plug in, very similar to two magnets in Dermot's work, then wouldn't there be noise cancellation or phase cancellation or like phase lock happen, where then that separateness or that under or over, surplus or deficiency, yin yang dynamic gets brought into a origin sound or origin order, where disorder collapses into order. So what I think is happening in like getting to hang in your lab and talking about this dance between sympathetic and parasympathetic is what I notice in my work is, and this is my language for it with my curriculum, but I talk about people's habits of front brain versus back train. So here's who I am in the cortex, here's when I go limbic, here's my angel mode, here's my animal mode. So someone can have almost two different personalities, right? And so we want to make that wrong. We pass it through this filter of like, people think animal mode is wrong, but like your intuition, which is about what to move toward, and your instinct, which is about what to move away from, there actually isn't that the animal in you is wrong. We need to give it a seat at the table and make there be peace between the two, right? So what I love about your work is you're saying, you know, you shouldn't be in sympathetic all the time and you shouldn't be in parasympathetic all the time. It's literally a dance of coherence. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, because I think this ties in with everyone else's life's work here, you're testing that there should be about every 90 seconds that we vacillate, right? And that we dance between the two. So I think that there's this profound way in which what Skai might be able to say about 0 point, right? What Dermot might be able to say about magnets is, rather than getting at this, like, I have a problem and I should fix it, I have an illness and I need to fix it. In my work with people and getting like mess out of the field, we're collapsing the timeline as if their electrical system or nervous system never had that trauma to begin with and doesn't even call it a trauma and doesn't use the word I need to heal a thing. So it's as if it was never on their timeline to begin with. So I think all of us in our own way are actually creating a safe space for people to go into collapsing the wave or going into noise cancellation, where I'm canceling that event was even on my timeline. So maybe the three of you can speak to that, but I think we're all using different language for really something tied to unification or coherence.
Yeah, what came to me was that all paths lead to Rome, you know. And it's a bit the same with 0 point. When I'm hearing Dermot, when I'm hearing Jeffrey, you know, I realize, or when I'm hearing you, there's different ways to get there, you know, through technology, through meditation, through whatever. That doesn't mean it's anything can bring there. I don't believe that. Basically, the practice needs to be coherent, whether it's scientific, technological, you know, meditative. It has to come from a coherent place, you know, and then you can access that. But you can also be looped if there is distortion in almost getting there or believing you're there and not really being there. You know? So that's why for me, the integrity and the mastery of the teacher, the healer, the scientist, you know, the artist, it's really important, you know, because we sending spells with our words, with our intentions. They can be positive or negative. They can free people or they can keep them basically entrapped, you know, into different realities. So that's really my feeling when I hear to that is we can bring people into these states in many ways, ourselves as well, but we have to be responsible with how we're using these frequencies. And so knowing ours first and knowing our own 0 point, because it's very for people. For me, it's really the first place before to begin serving like others. So. Yeah, it's very beautiful to hear these different ways to reach that same place, which is gonna take colors, you know, different colors for everyone, because we also all coming from source, stemming from source, but we're also all very different. You know, I don't like what I call that spiritual communism, that we all the same, you know, we all one. No, I think we have all gradations, you know, we are all at very different level of consciousness, different level of experiences, and that's what's great, actually, that we're not all the same. In essence, yeah, when we go completely to source, to the 0 point, we are similar. But in practice and in this reality, we are actually individualized and very different. And for me, balancing these two, no, and doing that sort of infinity loop, no, that Jeffrey was talking about is really the goal. And personally, I was diagnosed bipolar, no, in 2006, no, bipolar with schizophrenic tendency, because I was oscillating between that instinct, that lower self, and that higher self. I had visions also, so the future, many different things. So for a normal psychiatrist, it was bipolarity with schizophrenia, and I understand the diagnostic, but I heal it, you know, through the silence, and then I understood I cannot compress that lower self. That's what I've been trying to do. That's why I had so much austerities, because I was tired to have this guy, this lower self, you know, always popping up. I wanted only to listen to that higher guidance, you know, to that intuition. And I could never really find full peace with that. I had basically I reached high level of concentration, of power, of understanding many things, but never full peace. Full peace was only when I've been dancing actually with my lower self, my higher self, and progressively bridging them together, closer, 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 so they become one. But they become one for a time and then become separate again, because that's to me the game of incarnating. You never just like one like that, you know, except if you stay in an ashram meditating all the time. But the moment you go into life, you're gonna oscillate between higher, lower self, you know, all the time, and rebalancing them. And when you accept fully that place, that movement, then you start being in the 0 point. You start walking through this oscillation from the center and not being completely carried away, no, on the right or to ecstasy or pure bliss, or on the left, you know, to scattered or chaos. And you start bringing harmony into your own life and into others around you, you know, and that is contagious. Basically, a lot of people, they tell me, yeah, I'll never be able to silence my mind, and when I do meditation, immediately it falls. Well, because in the frequency, it's embedded, you know, in a recording or in something like that, and the person, I'm not expert in that, but that's what I understand, the person brave word thinks with this guidance, and it probably cancels the noise also, like Jeffrey is talking about. You know, it cancels that noise and bring that person to silence.
Yeah.
Do you think, Dermot, you could add to that or teach us about, because I want to bring this opportunity to everyone to come to this global meditation and really receive this massive, like, to update, to upgrade, to upgrace thyself with magnetic coherence. Like, can you explain why there being stronger polarity between the North and South Pole for the Earth, or in Dr. Jeffrey experiencing that dance between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic kicking back this musical symphony to one another and having shared bond, right? How is it, and maybe you can talk about your own practice with this too, but how is it that just creating really coherent phi ratio and heightened magnetics, how is that healing anything non-verbally? How does that just kick something out of the body where they come into your office with a condition and they leave? They've only been around a magnet and a strong bond between two magnets. How do they leave healed? What is taking place there?
Yeah, so what Skai was talking about there, Skai was talking about there with the polarization of different aspects. First thing that came to my mind was the ego and the self. So like the ego gets a bad rap sometimes because it creates separateness, but without the ego, we have no way of finding a unification between things. So that's a huge aspect that we sometimes always think, the ego is making me do this. I don't want to do this. I want to be more myself. But we need this duality to bring us back into the null pressure zone where we can then manifest things, bring things into reality. So yeah, within my practice, one of the main things I noticed was, especially treating Lyme disease as well, and starting with normal magnets on the body to try and seek balance in different individuals. And with Lyme, if anybody's been through Lyme within their family, it's a horrible experience to see one of your family members go through it. And it's just so debilitating. So from that standpoint, and where people go through a real journey with it, and with all the patients I've treated, I've noticed that as soon as they go through this kind of journey, they reach a point where it has to be themselves kind of coming into play and taking it on board themselves and bringing it to sort of, I like to say, like the last 10% is up to the individual. There's a point where the therapist and the patient has to kind of separate. and then find the individuals to find unification within themselves. They don't have to be tied to the therapist. And that's kind of a duality between healing as a practitioner, and then creating the vacuum. Especially, my main thing was like, okay, what is a magnet? What's this force? What is going on? And through that research and doing things like using the ferrocell on the body, we essentially looked at, okay, what is the expression of the field? It's no longer the iron filings example that's outdated. I don't know why we're still using that in schools, to be honest, but we should be using ferrocells everywhere to try and see the true expression of the magnetic field. And that expression is essentially spiral motion, which is fine. And I think at the end of all this, whenever I was going through this kind of cycle of, okay, where's this information coming from? How have I managed to create this healing device? I was so sure that I had to make this as clean as possible, as coherent as possible, within phi ratio, within divine ratio, because it's a huge responsibility to take that on board and present that to the world. But at the very end, I noticed that I was trying to treat a pathogen that is spiral in nature, parasites. And I'm using spirals to treat bodies to try and remove that spiral aspect. So I like to look at like Lyme disease and Borrelia, the parasite that is incoherent in the body, using spiral mechanics, very intelligent, but it's not coherent to the body. So ultimately, if we place a coherent spiral motion mechanic from the phi cube, we can essentially disrupt that and drive it out of the body. And I think looking back on that in retrospect, for me, it's essentially, we're all given these things to kind of, okay, deal with this, work with this, try and figure out what this is all about, try and bring this into some sort of harmony, because sometimes like Skai and Dr. Jeffrey are talking about, it's just noise that comes through and we're like, okay, a lot of variables here, we have to compartmentalize, how do we bring things back into unification again? And we have to start from that standpoint. We have to use the ego mind almost in a way. We have to bring the quantitative into standpoint. But ultimately, I think the end result will always be becoming one again. Through all the research, we're just trying to eliminate in that process to try and bring it all together. Like, so, yeah, ultimately, I think with consciousness and Mickaela's daring, and I love it. I love how daring she is doing this type of stuff and bringing all these people together. It's amazing. I just think that bringing everybody together and global meditation, bringing people into coherence and making sure that if we have all of a single intention, a single force of magnitude that is coherent in its purpose, it can move mountains. It literally can. Like, so I think that's a huge thing to look at when we try and undertake these type of things.
And just, I know you know my joking word that I made up for this, but it kind of ties in with everyone's work here too, is that really there's far faster healing, if we want to use that word, when we use withedness rather than againstness. Can you speak to that a little bit? Because you're noticing with Lyme disease, it's actually the spirochetes are a spiral, and it's almost like they're going counterclockwise and against life. And all you're really doing is saying, let's increase the magnetism and go with life. But rather than making it wrong or going against it, and I really find that Skai's work is equally powerful, it's like, no, just be a part of everything and be with it, and like go to the center and then literally be connected to everything all at once. And from that, there's this order that emanates. So do you find with magnets that if you focus on like coherence and magnetism and withedness, is that a stronger healing method than going against something?
Yeah, for sure. I think the ultimate aim of phi is to seek the smallest space possible and the quickest time frame, whilst not creating too much noise. So we're trying to create a packet, like Dr. Jeffrey's talking about there, that is coherent, a coherent space. And essentially with the null point, like Skai's talking about there, that null pressure zone is the mediation of all the pressure not going to that boundary line within the center. So at the center of every magnet, we have a null point, we have a pressure zone, but that's essentially the harnessing point for the field. And if we bring that into equilibrium, we can do amazing things ultimately. Like, so I do think that every individual that can find their center point through magnetism, through cymatics, whatever it may be. Like there's ultimately different flavors of the same thing, and it can bring things into a unified way, like for everybody.
Yeah, and if I can add to this, I agree with what you just said also, Mickaela, because I used to destroy viruses, destroy things. I have a bit of a warrior side, that's been also part of my past to go really beyond limits, and against many things. So it would work, I used to do that. I would destroy AIDS, from LA to Paris when I would do, one-on-one healings and at distance. But it would always create friction after for me. It would affect my energy. That's why I would get drained. So the person would heal, like very fast, but I would get more and more drained. And then I'm progressively starting embracing, basically really embracing, not loving in a naive sense of it, because when you work with a negative entity, I see exactly what Dermot described. When I go into the field, I see usually a counterclockwise spinning vortex, basically that's sucking, that's siphoning energies. And so now I guide people to do this, to embrace that movement and to begin clearing it, to become one with it, but at the same time, to bring it to the void, to bring it to the 0 point, out of the field, within it. And as we're doing so, the true coherent energy can enter. And then when it's clear, we usually see a light, or we feel lighter, we have a body experience, that shows us, that it's done, basically. And then we begin reprogramming clockwise, bringing with our consciousness, which is again creating a groove, with sound and air, and then creating energy. We bring back that into the field, and that's how you can recreate cartilage. You can recreate, basically, it's not limited. It depends on people. Coherence, size of the group, etc. But we've seen things that are called miracles very consistently, and very rapidly. So yeah, and it's interesting that we find that same movement. It went to me after years, starting counterclockwise. I didn't know about any the science behind it. I just started moving energy out counterclockwise. And a few years later, Spirit told me, now you can go clockwise, to reprogram. And then I learned about the torus, and how that functions. I said, oh, interesting. That's exactly that. So we're basically realigning, the person into the toroidal field, using pure consciousness, that's available everywhere all the time.
Amazing.
Well, Dermot, where can people get your Phi Cube? If you could mention a website for anybody that is listening here right now. I already, in preparation of today, I've reached out to a couple of people that I know have Lyme's disease, and I said, watch this broadcast, and here might be a solution for you. How do people get a hold of you, or what's your website?
Yeah, sure. So the website is www.phicube.io. And then there's also the phifieldfoundation.com, where there's a lot of more information on the concept of Phi and the device itself and things like that. Yeah, it's all there on the website. A lot of information, but just take your time.
Beautiful. Thank you. I just had a black bear throw over the garbage can here right next to me, and my dog chasing after the black bear, so I had to step away for a couple of minutes while I was still listening to you. But that's what happens in the 0 point energy field. And
we've been magnetizing a black bear.
Well, I just want to add to the fact that there's all these beautiful symbologies all the time, is that it was literally during the conversation where we were saying, don't try to kill the virus, don't be against something, like go with it. And you have the dog chasing the black bears,
dog and the bear.
within this, and no one got injured in this dog bear exchange. So
yeah,
beautiful. And I was muted, but I was trying to say, just to support Dermot, that Phi Cube and the Phi Field Foundation is spelled PHI instead of FI, just so they can easily find it.
Beautiful. So what an inspirational conversation today. Not just from the possibilities as to relating to the individual, but also collectively, but also the level of knowledge, dedication, and the service to humanity. extraordinary 1.5 hours that we just spent together. Deeply touched my heart and my soul and my 0 point energy field within myself. And so before we're closing out, is there anything else that each and one of you would want to share?
Well, I would like to thank Mickaela for bringing that amazing team together. It feels a bit like a superhero movie. I had vision of that. In 2011, I was visioning the future. Remote viewing. I wouldn't call that remote viewing at the time, and I saw many events that happened, including the pandemics, the war, artificial intelligence, and immortality after in the 2030s. And I saw a boat in Antarctica. So there's a negative always. I was going on a boat. I was writing a movie out of it with a group of artists and scientists, and we were making light and sound experiments on the fjords. So I had literally picture and a copyright of this trilogy I wrote in 2011. That was just before I went into silence. 8 producers, directors in LA, everybody wanted to do it. And that's when I decided to go into silence. So that's very interesting that after this chapter, now, boom, I receive an invite to be part of. And we were supposed to go on a boat on top of it, but now we're going on the truck. So that's very interesting, this negative, that you can channel and download, and how it happens after into reality in almost negative way. So I'm very grateful to all of you, to Michael for bringing this amazing also quality of questions and visual, Jeffrey for this legendary work. I cannot wait to dig too much into it more, and same thing, Dermot. Very also happy to discover your work. It's inspiring. That's exactly what I called. I want to explore more science now. So.
I would say too that Skai, your vision of it needs to be a boat, and it was Antarctica, and we're like on land in the North Pole, which means we just need to make a second Indiana Jones adventure into Antarctica too. We'll do both.
Maybe, yeah.
So I think that this is another example of what I've been feeling. I mean, we've all been out here developing our own thing around what our talents are that were given to us. You develop something that's unique to us and our talents and whatever it is that we're into. For me, it's sound, and there's electromagnetic fields, and there's all of these different things at a period of time when the world is going through a profound polarizing change, and the sort of the negative forces seem to be in a dominant mode. And I feel the pull of my responsibility as a sort of my whatever level of consciousness I've got and the self-awareness I have. So I had this T-shirt idea. Waking up sucks. Because with becoming more awake, comes the responsibility that goes with that. You can't look away from the things. You can't look away from suffering any longer. It's if the world is going down the tube, then the light workers get called. And I see that. I see the people who are doing the light work are being pulled out of their private personal niche that they've been in and are being drawn together with other light workers. It's the natural flow of how these things always work. As the dark forces require a quantity of large groups of quote asleep people who require somebody to tell them what to do. 80% of the people on a bell curve, 20% of the people are self-starters and self-employed and artists and musicians and new ideas coming through. It's always been that way. And so when the dark forces assemble large groups of sort of asleep people and start telling them what to do, it pulls forth out of the grassroots the light workers who balance that scale by smaller groups of people with, quote, heavy consciousness versus large quantities of people with light consciousness, and the scales balance. And if that's the way it is, then when these smaller groups can use what they know to create coherence in their field, where people, like right now, we come together, we start to share our ideas, we start to find out, oh, what, you're doing that? Wow, that fits with what I'm doing here. And I start to see a bigger picture of why we might be being drawn together, why we're feeling that pull. Because what I've seen just in my private practice is the more techniques that I can precisely align together in some kind of a treatment plan, the more powerful the whole thing becomes. So then the whole thing started to become aligning sound with vibration, with light, and with electromagnetic fields, so that it's not so that they're aligned together. The more things you can stack precisely together, the more close you get to opening the magic door, which is bigger than the sum of those parts. And it's the same with us drawing ourselves together. When we draw together what I've got and what you've got and what you've got and what you've got, we can see that we've got a puzzle piece, and we're being pulled to assemble these puzzle pieces together in something that's bigger and more magnificent that we can only see the outline of right now. We don't exactly know where this is all going to fit, but we know it fits. We know that there's something big being assembled here that we're part of, and it's an exciting time to be manifest in the world, because at these period of times, we signed up for this. We signed up for this period of time when the shit show is happening, because we've got a piece that needs to be assembled to counterbalance. We've got a job to do, and we're being called for to do that job. So it's always a great sort of spiritual pleasure for me to meet like-minded, like-hearted people, because it just spizzes me up. It's going, wow, there is cool shit happening in the universe, like good stuff going on here, and
Yeah.
and I get to be part of it. It's like, wow, it doesn't get better than this. So I don't know where this is all leading, aside from the North Pole. I said to Mickaela, you are just my kind of madman. I mean, what a harebrained, crazed idea it is, and it's so beautiful. Anyway, who knows what's going to happen as a thunderclap in the
Yeah.
continuum of a bunch of people whose heads are screwed on in the right way, going to the North Pole to do all this stuff that we know how to do at an eclipse moment. I don't know. I mean, you be prepared to, like, I don't know, all they're going to find is like a black smoking hole in the ground where, well, and a reconfiguration of the whole continuum of Earth. I just think is awesome. So it's a pleasure and a wonderful thing to be here. So thank you for having me part of this in whatever way that is. And blessings to everybody.
You too.
I do want to hear what Dermot has to say, and I want to explore more about what your technology is.
Yeah, for sure. That was a beautiful. I feel like that was a perfect conclusion to the whole podcast. So I'm not going to say much, I don't think. Yeah, I mean, with me and Mickaela as well, especially, I think there was a lot of strange synchronicities and coincidences that actually brought us together. So I'm noticing that just Mickaela's team or collaboration with different people just keeps on adding and adding and adding. And I just love listening to Skai, listening to you, Dr. Jeffrey. And I just think that more like-minded people, just attesting to what you said there, is perfect. I can't say it any better, to be honest. Can't say it more coherent than you just said it. So
I will say, Dermot, I will say too that Dermot literally is creating a way for the cubes to continue coherent. So we're kind of exploring. When we first met, I had said like, oh, I think you built a temple in a box. And I had been putting my body through so much to go like walk hundreds of miles in silence or walk to pyramids to get there, walk to temples all around the world, because I needed to get 144 temples at a moment of alignment and coherence into one movie file to make these fractal films that would help the human nervous system. Like I had this huge vision of what I was trying to do. And Dermot getting to come experience like a fractal film for the first time, it was like even him being in his life's work to create, like phi coherence, he was like, oh, wow, I understood math in a different way, or I understood how these things fit together because of the fractal. So he had this experience of the fractal, like dropping him deeper into his life's work. And I had the experience of him playing his magnets, playing the phi cubes during a fractal. I watched it cohere the room to the point that I was like, oh, all the temples that are in this fractal are like temple technology in order, and this is a temple in a box. So I think that's the joy of when you meet someone who's really like in their zone of genius or in their lane, but they're also just having fun like a little kid trying to figure out what makes a magnet work. Like we're trying to put a picture on a fridge and we're like, how does it do it? That like sweetness of Michael's questions, right? Like he's just a little kid being like, where does the energy come from? That like tabula rasa, innocence, curiosity, awe, beauty, richness, that driving element in all of us, to mix that with being so true to our lane is literally a temple in a box. Like then we're becoming the living field, we're becoming the everything, we're becoming our highest emanation of sound and shape. So I love to nerd out with Dermot and all the folks that I get to meet. And that's the joy of it, is like, you're a superhero, I want you to meet my other superhero friends. Like there's actually just like a sensation of getting the band back together. So I just want to thank you all for like
I like
trusting.
what you said about being in the lane.
Yes.
I mean, I am a child of the 60s, remember, it's like and in the lane is what used to be called in the groove, and that's where groovy came from. So when we're into the new groovy, full circle. I have to start searching for my tie-dye t-shirts.
Well, talking about t-shirts and what you said earlier, Dr. Jeff, when you said you wanted to create a t-shirt that says "Waking Up Sucks." How can we? And that's really where my purpose and my contribution is going to come in. How can we make waking up not suck? How can we create a coherent, harmonious, purposeful, meaningful way to start the day and set the foundation for the rest of the day? And I
think how you make it not suck is surrender to the responsibility that comes with being conscious.
And so I'm going to suggest to print t-shirts that say "Waking up doesn't suck anymore."
Oh, that's a cool one. I like that. Oh, yeah.
Can you actually, this is me.
One.
I have to plug all the superheroes here because I love you all so much. But
one.
Michael, can you take the opportunity, because it's such a beautiful way to end this, is to awaken. But will you explain what the Awaken app is? And because I don't think Dr. Jeffrey knows how much that's hilarious that he said, waking up sucks, and you actually have invented a way for people to wake up differently. So can you tell them what you do for
Well,
living?
from a scientific point of view, this first jarring alarm first thing in the morning has a 74% spike in blood pressure. It has a cortisol spike, and it also has an instant effect on our brain, reducing our mental capacity for around 51%. And so this initial spike first in the morning lasts about 8 to 10 minutes until our body is actually recuperate from the fight or flight mode, or that survival mode that is being triggered by our body, because it literally perceives it as a threat. And so and I've had conversations with Dr. Jeff and Shay, his son, in the past. What we are envisioning and what we're creating is an app that will pull people out of the sleep, out of the subconscious, the high alpha theta state, into the conscious with specific beneficial sound and frequencies and soundscapes for the optimized waking up experience for the body, because the alarm clock was never considered to be, or it wasn't designed for the well-being of people. It was designed to get you out of bed, get you into a train, and get you into a factory. And so what we're saying is, well, if we can take that first moment of the day where that was still connected to a higher, to God or to consciousness, where we still have one of the most potent parts of the day with the greatest potential, if we can make that harmonic and coherent, and then together combining uplifting messages that we can send each other to really empower each other to live a life in greater coherence and harmony and empathy and connection and relationship, I believe we can shift that experience first in the morning from waking up sucks to waking up doesn't suck anymore. I'm actually looking forward to waking up because I'm here to fulfill my life's purpose. And I'm here to fulfill my life's purpose on a daily basis. And if we can empower each other around the planet to do that, I believe we can shift our human experience.
Even more beautiful than that would be like awaken into bliss, awaken into peace. Not waking up does not suck. It's still a tiny box. Let's go even higher into coherence and let it be whatever it wants to be. But I think when you bridge all of the wisdom just between the four of you, like your life's work is actually a different flavor of really cool ice cream, which is creating coherence. I think it's also beautiful. So thanks for being you.
Well, thank you, everybody. Again, what an inspiring conversation. I'm deeply grateful for your time, your presence, your contribution to humanity, your wisdom, your knowledge, and how you show up in the world, and how you actually implement your life's purpose into practical solutions for other human beings and for the world at large and for consciousness at large. So thank you for being here, and thank you everybody for watching. Until next time, many blessings to you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So
You all.
grateful to you guys.